Have you ever felt just completely stuck in that space between a traumatic event happening and, finally being able to move on from it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a very real thing.
Right, like you're surviving technically, but you feel completely trapped in transit.
Exactly.
Your body is going through the motions of a regular Tuesday morning, but your mind is it's still locked in that one terrible moment from years ago.
It is an incredibly common and honestly an intensely isolating state of being.
Yeah.
And diagnosing that stuck state is where um, modern medicine often hits a brick wall.
Because usually when you talk about a medical diagnosis, we expect precision.
Right. A clear answer.
Yeah, it feels like engineering. You break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is, broken.
It's binary
Eh?
and it's visible.
Exactly. But you step into the world of human memory and trauma, and suddenly that x-ray machine it's completely useless. You are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is entirely murky.
We are forced to navigate the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters.
Oh.
And that murky territory, that between state, is exactly what we are exploring in the source material today.
I'm so excited for this one.
Me too. We are looking at excerpts from a fascinating text called The Circular Ruin, the Detective Edition by Max and Claude.
Right.
And on its surface, this reads like a gritty noir procedural. You have a hard-boiled detective, a missing person, a city constantly bathed in, like, bureaucratic rain.
Very cinematic.
Very. But the text uses that familiar mystery framework to launch a deeply philosophical exploration of time, of trauma, and what it actually takes to bear witness to someone else's pain.
Which brings us to the investigator at the center of this whole thing, Detective Maro Voss.
Yes.
Voss is a guy with 19 years on the job, and he is a man of unyielding methodology.
To put it mildly.
Right. To understand his investigative style, imagine someone trying to read a deeply tragic, heartbreaking poem. But instead of just reading it and feeling the emotion, they insist on translating it word by word using a dictionary.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
They document the definition of every single word, entirely stripped of the poem's meaning, because they are absolutely terrified of actually feeling what the author was trying to say.
Yeah, he wants the data, not the emotion.
Exactly. It's like he's trying to read the raw HTML code of a website before looking at the actual web page. Voss insists on documenting facts devoid of context so he isn't biased. He writes everything down before he allows himself to understand it.
Because his rigidity is his armor.
Yeah.
And that armor is immediately tested by his current case. So Voss is investigating the disappearance of a watchmaker named Ariel Vantoch.
Okay.
Vantoch operates out of a workshop located at 14 Vassary Street. The complication arises when Voss attempts to pull the municipal records for this location.
And this is where it gets weird.
Very weird.
Yeah.
The municipal archives show that the building at 14 Vassary Street officially does not exist.
Which throws Voss completely. I mean, he goes there anyway, and the physical building is absolutely standing right there.
Right, it's not a hallucination.
No. He enters the unlocked workshop and finds it filled with ticking clocks. The text describes this incredibly visceral atmosphere. There's the smell of cedar, the metallic tang of machine oil, and what Voss distinctly identifies as the smell of sleep.
Which is such a striking detail.
It really is. But there is no watchmaker. So I have to ask, how does a physical multi-story building just get professionally excised from a city's history? And why would the government allow it?
Well, the archival history reveals something fascinating about the city's older bureaucratic systems.
Yeah.
Because this isn't a malicious cover-up of a crime.
Like it's not some mobster erasing a warehouse from the grid.
Exactly, no. The erasure is actually a protective measure. Long before modern, rigid record-keeping, 14 Vassary Street was grandfathered into the city's system as a, quote, station of the threshold.
A station of the threshold.
Or a house between states. The city's original architects recognized that this building serves an essential function that standard binary categories just cannot hold.
Wow.
Yeah. It is a dedicated sanctuary for people caught in the borderland.
And the text defines the borderland as that specific state of consciousness where a person is split.
Right.
Like half of their mind is trying to buy groceries and survive in the present reality, while the other half is still trapped back in the exact moment their life shattered.
When the source material notes that the event has happened, but they are still in it, that is the defining characteristic of the borderland.
That gives me chills.
It's powerful. And 14 Vassary Street exists outside of normal municipal time to be a safe container for people in that highly vulnerable state.
Okay, so standing in this officially non-existent sanctuary, Voss finds the object that triggered this entire missing persons case to begin with.
It's the pocket watch.
Right. It's an antique silver pocket watch belonging to a client named Renata Sabo. She had left her grandfather Istvan's watch with the missing watchmaker for repairs.
And the provenance of this object is just haunting.
It really is. Istvan received this watch in the winter of 1944 from a mysterious man in a heavy coat. The man simply handed it to him and said, "As long as it runs, what happened here is not finished."
And for 40 years, every single morning, Istvan wound that watch.
Every single morning, Voss discovers Vantoch's personal journal sitting on the workbench, detailing his examination of that specific watch.
And Vantoch makes a startling realization.
Right, he finds out the watch isn't broken.
No, it's not broken at all. But the hands are not measuring seconds or minutes in any conventional way. Vantoch writes that the mechanism is actually measuring trauma's duration.
Trauma's duration, meaning the distance between a traumatic event and the self that somehow survived it.
Exactly.
Now, I have to push back a little here. As much as I love a metaphysical concept, a mechanical silver pocket watch actually experiencing or measuring human trauma, that sounds like, I don't know, literal magic. A piece of metal cannot feel sadness.
It sounds totally supernatural, I agree.
Yeah.
Until we look at the text's underlying philosophy of objects and memory.
Okay.
It is a magic. It is a shared mechanical language of grief. The text argues that a profoundly significant object doesn't just exist in time, it translates.
Translates time.
Yeah. Think about the physical manifestations of PTSD.
Right.
We know the body keeps the score. The trauma lives in the nervous system.
Right.
For Istvan, surviving the horrors of 1944 left him with an experience he could never put into words. Winding that watch every single day became a physical, bodily acknowledgement of his own survival.
So the tension of the spring was the only testimony he could give.
Exactly.
Winding it was his way of saying, I am still here, the event is still unresolved, and the record of that pain continues.
He couldn't speak about the trauma, so the physical act of winding the watch took the shape of his testimony.
Wow. And Vantoch, the missing watchmaker, uses this object to realize something profound about the very nature of his profession. He writes that true repair isn't about returning a broken thing to its original pristine state.
Vantoch explicitly calls the attempt to return to a prior state a form of refusal.
A form of refusal.
Because the original state is permanently gone. You cannot unshatter the glass. True repair, in his philosophy, is integrating the break into the mechanism itself.
Ensuring that the watch runs with the trauma, not despite it.
Yes. The event must become a functional part of the continuity of the self, rather than something you aggressively try to erase.
That completely reframes the entire concept of healing. You aren't trying to pretend the damage didn't happen. You are adjusting the gears to accommodate the new shape of the metal.
Right.
But Voss isn't just investigating a watchmaker's philosophy here. As he digs deeper into the archive access logs, trying to figure out who else has been looking into 14 Vazari Street, he hits a wall of his own making.
The twist here is just brilliant.
He finds his own name. The logs show Voss visited this exact building 11 years ago during a 3-week medical leave in October.
A leave of absence that he has absolutely zero memory of taking.
None. The detective discovers he is already inside the mystery he is trying to solve.
And the repressed memory that surfaces is devastating. The text details a catastrophic building collapse 11 years prior. Voss was trapped deep in the dark rubble for 3 agonizing hours.
And the visceral detail of that scene in the text is suffocating. Voss is pinned in absolute darkness, choking on concrete dust. And he realizes he is holding 2 hands.
Yeah.
In his left hand, he is holding the hand of his colleague, Benedict Farkas, who is already dead. And in his right hand, he is holding the hand of a woman who is still alive.
3 hours in the pitch black.
Acting as the literal bridge between the living and the dead. To survive that unimaginable psychological horror without completely losing his mind, his consciousness had to split.
A psychological fracture was the only viable survival mechanism. A part of his mind immediately retreated to the borderland, that space of between states.
And that fracture is what led his consciousness directly to 14 Vazari Street.
Yes. For the 3 weeks following the collapse, while Voss's physical body was recovering in a hospital bed, his consciousness was residing in that workshop where Ariel Vantoch was actively attending to him.
Which means that ever since that October 11 years ago, Voss and Vantoch have been mutually dreaming of each other.
Mutually dreaming.
It is like 2 halves of a single brain trying to heal a massive wound across an entire city.
That's a great analogy.
Voss represents the large view, the municipal detective whose entire job is to document the breaking, the damage, the catastrophic collapses on a macro scale. And Vantoch represents the small view, the meticulous watchmaker who attends to the delicate, localized repair.
They desperately need each other's perspective.
But wait, if they are locked in a mutual dream, hallucinating each other to cope, who is actually in charge of solving this missing person's case?
Well, that paradox introduces one of the most vital psychological concepts in the text, which is the third figure.
The third figure.
Vantoch notes in his journal that they have been jointly dreaming a third entity. But the third figure isn't a new character who's going to mysteriously walk through the door and rescue them.
Right.
The third figure is the psychological capacity created when two distinct perspectives, the large view and the small view, aligned in mutual attention.
Okay, give me an analogy for how that actually works in practice. Because jointly dreaming a capacity is a pretty heavy concept to visualize.
Fair enough. Think about binocular vision.
Okay.
If you close one eye, you can still see the world, but you lose depth perception. Everything becomes flat, and judging the distance of objects becomes incredibly difficult.
Right, you need both eyes.
You need two eyes, separated by a bit of distance, looking at the exact same object to triangulate depth and see reality in 3 dimensions.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Trauma is profoundly isolating. It flattens your world into a single, inescapable dimension. Healing requires a joint consciousness. You cannot fully process the deepest wounds alone.
You need that second aperture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another person aimed at the same event to create the capacity for true integration. The third figure is that newfound depth perception. It is the space of healing generated between two people bearing witness to the same pain.
So Vantoch knows how to be that second aperture. He knows how to attend to Voss and create that depth perception. But how does a simple neighborhood watchmaker know how to conduct complex trauma therapy?
Right. It doesn't quite add up at first.
To understand his skill, we have to look backward at the lineage of 14 Vazari Street and the true nature of the people who operate it, who are known as the keepers.
The lineage reveals the core methodology of the keepers. And it's fascinating because they don't actively fix people.
They don't.
No, they don't offer life advice, they don't hand out pamphlets, and they don't prescribe medication. Their entire practice is built around one grueling directive.
Which is?
Simply hold still while others move through.
Hold still while others move through, which runs completely counter to everything modern society teaches us about helping people.
Oh, totally.
If someone you care about is hurting, the immediate instinct is to jump into action. We want to give them a 10-step recovery plan, recommend a self-help book, biohack their trauma, or, assure them that time heals all wounds.
We desperately want to fill the uncomfortable silence.
We do, but these keepers just do absolutely nothing.
Well, doing nothing and holding still are very different things.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The text emphasizes that holding still is an intensely active, exhausting form of psychological labor. Vantoch compares his teacher, an old woman named Ursabet, to a physical lens that concentrates light.
Wow.
She held still for 40 years, offering her own regulated nervous system as an anchor for those who were shattering.
40 years.
And before her was Ilona, a nurse operating during the horrors of World War I. The practice of the keepers survives precisely because it rejects the modern urge to force people to immediately get over their pain.
It acts as a safe, sturdy container for someone else's shattered reality until they are finally ready to integrate it.
Exactly. It is the exhausting work of sitting in the dark with someone and refusing to look away.
And that lineage of keepers traces all the way back to the winter of 1944. It traces back to V, the mysterious man in the heavy coat who handed Renata's grandfather the watch in the first place.
The origin of the watch.
Right. The source material reveals that V was a keeper who encountered a situation so catastrophic, he realized he couldn't physically bring the victims of the war to the sanctuary at 14 Vazari Street.
So he brought the sanctuary to them?
Yes. He walked directly into the traumatic event, and in doing so, he passed into a third form. He somehow transferred the very essence of the keeper's practice, that infinite capacity to hold still and bear witness, into the mechanical gears of the pocket watch itself.
The watch became a mobile sanctuary.
Which brings us out of the archive files and the historical lineage and squarely back to the present day. Renata Sabo, the granddaughter of the man who received that watch in 1944, finally returns to the workshop.
And the scene is just beautiful.
She walks in, and she knows instinctually that the agonizing distance has been covered. She picks up her grandfather's watch from the workbench, this object that has been ticking the exact duration of a family's trauma for over 4 decades.
Yeah.
She holds it in her hands, and she simply says, "I received it." The watch runs for a brief moment and then completely stops.
It stops. But, as Vantoch's notes would remind us, it isn't broken.
Right, it's not broken at all.
The main string has simply given back all the stored kinetic energy of 40 years of daily desperate winding. The distance between the horrific event in 1944 and the surviving lineage has finally closed.
The traumatic record has been fully, completely witnessed.
Yeah.
The metaphor of that watch stopping is staggering. It is the mechanical equivalent of a massive generational exhalation after a family has been holding its breath for decades.
It really is.
It makes you look around and wonder how many people you pass on the street are carrying running watches of their own. You know, records of old pain or inherited trauma just ticking away in their pockets, waiting for someone to truly witness them so they can finally let the gears stop.
Acknowledging that need for a witness is what ultimately completes Detective Voss's character arc, too.
Yes, his ending is so perfect.
He realizes the investigation is over, but not in any way he could have predicted 19 years ago. He officially closes his missing persons case with a highly irregular, incredibly poetic final report.
What does he write?
He writes, subject located, interior, status, essential, recommendation, return.
Subject located interior. He abandons the dictionary. He stops looking for clues and facts stripped of meaning, and he finally starts looking at the human reality in front of him.
Voss transitions from a detective who looks for things demanding evidence, suspects, and rigid conclusions to a keeper who simply looks at things, offering his presence.
He turns in his badge.
He does. He trades his old life of bureaucratic reign and joins Vantoch in the practice. And eventually, Vantoch crafts a custom pocket watch specifically for Voss to mark his time in the practice.
Right.
And he asks Voss what he wants engraved on the silver cover.
Voss asks for the exact same engraving that was on Istvan's watch. A door, slightly ajar.
The door slightly ajar is the perfect visual representation of the threshold. It fundamentally changes how we view the borderland.
How so?
Well, it isn't a terrifying waiting room that you need to aggressively escape from. The open door suggests it is the most essential place where true, empathetic human connection actually occurs.
We started this depth dive looking at a hard-boiled missing persons case. A rigid detective, rain-slipped streets, and missing bureaucratic files.
Yeah, a classic noir setup.
And it morphed into an exploration of repressed memory, of a building collapse and shared dreaming. And it concludes as this profound masterclass in the exhausting art of holding still and bearing witness to the pain of others.
It challenges the entire framework of how we approach healing in the modern world.
Mm.
It suggests that sometimes the most powerful intervention you can offer someone isn't an action, an answer, or a strategy.
Right.
It is simply the quality of your unbroken presence.
Before we wrap up, there's a final thought hidden in the strict rules of this lineage that is definitely worth pulling apart.
Oh, absolutely.
The text notes several times that the building at 14 Vassary Street finds the ones who need it.
Yes.
But crucially, it also reveals that the people who need the sanctuary the most, the ones with the most profound fractures, are the exact same people who eventually step up to become its next keepers. The patient inevitably becomes the practitioner.
The people who have been broken in the borderland are the only ones trusted to operate the sanctuary.
Which implies something incredible about the nature of human suffering. I mean, we are taught to view deep trauma purely as a wound, right? As a deficit, something that lessens us.
That's the standard medical view.
Right. But this lineage implies that surviving profound pain might actually be the strict, non-negotiable prerequisite for developing the capacity to truly heal others.
It is a total paradigm shift.
If that terrifying between state is the place where our normal minds are broken, could it also be the only forge hot enough to manufacture true world-changing empathy?
It really leaves you thinking.
It leaves you to wonder what specific borderlands you have survived in your own life. What between states might you be uniquely qualified to help others navigate simply because you know exactly what it feels like to be trapped in the dark?
It reframes our deepest, most lingering pain, not as a permanent liability, but as a hard-won qualification.
Think back to that broken X-ray machine we talked about at the very beginning. The murky, impossible-to-navigate waters of human memory and trauma. Maybe we don't need a perfectly clear binary picture to start the healing process.
Maybe not.
Maybe we don't need to fix the diagnostic machine at all. Maybe we just need someone who has been in the dark before, who is willing to sit with us in that room, look closely at the blurry, confusing image, and simply hold still.